Thank you all for joining us today. Our session today again is sensory flavor in beer. And so we're super excited to have you all here. And we've got I'm going to pass it over to Tessa, our Yakima Chief Hops host for today, as well as we got Jeremy and a couple guests, Denny and Drew. Some of you may recognize them, so I'm going to let them take it away.
Thanks, Nicole. And thanks everyone for joining us for some 10 a.m. beers. It's a nice time to be alive when that's the thing you're starting your day with. Just a little introduction of myself. My name's Tessa. I'm the beer sensory coordinator here at Yakima Chief. I've been with Yakima Chief for about a year now. I basically came here straight after I finished my dissertation for a Master's of Brewing and Distilling at Heriot-Watt University in Scotland. Before that, I worked in a couple different breweries kind of around the world, actually, but it was always just doing kind of grunt work. So I didn't really get into, recipe design and that kind of thing until I started formally studying brewing at Heriot-Watt. And now I moved the beer sensory program here at YCH along with the help of JT, who is our brewer, and I'll let him go ahead and introduce himself to you all.
All right, thank you, Tessa. Like you said, my name is JT. I am the brewery manager here at Yakima Chief. Been here about 2 years now. I started in the sales side of things, but moved over to brewing. Brewing's kind of where my heart and passion is at. I started out my brewing career at White Labs down in San Diego, kind of working in the lab down there. Most recently, I was at Silver City. In between there, I was working for Fremont Brewing for about 6 years. So yeah, definitely my heart's in the brewing side of things. I love sales as well. Happy to be here, happy to be part of it. Really stoked with the YCH and the sensory program that Tessa has built. It's been really awesome. It's been a really cool thing to be part of. But yeah, we'll continue on with our intros. Drew, let's start with you, just since you're next to me on the screen. But if you want to kind of just go ahead and introduce yourself, and then Denny, you can go right after.
I'm a dummy.
I don't think there's any doubt about that.
I don't have nearly the same sort of brewing credentials as y'all, but yeah, I've been homebrewing since 1999, and I like to ask dumb questions.
Ask away.
Yeah, I'm Denny Kahn. I've been homebrewing since 1998. I just made batch number 571. Drew and I write books together. We got 3 of them out there: Experimental Homebrewing, Homebrew All-Stars, and Simple Homebrewing. And we also do a couple podcasts called Experimental Brewing and The Brew Files. And I'm really missing being in Yakima this year, so I'm glad we can at least do this.
Definitely.
Yeah, we appreciate. Go ahead.
I was going to say we miss everybody. Definitely are missing everybody down here in Yakima this year.
What we need is a cheesy Naugahyde background to recreate the sports center.
Oh, there you go. That's a good idea.
We'll get that over to you so you can use it in future Zoom calls for the rest of Harvest. I think that'd be good. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Perfect. Yeah, we appreciate having this homebrew perspective kind of with us today, and we love listening to you guys' questions, and yeah, that should be good. So I know everyone's dying to taste their beers, as I know I am, but I just want to kind of have you refrain for the moment. I'm going to kind of go through like the type of beer drinking that you would certainly not do in a pub where you go through all these very official steps. It's what we teach our beer panelists to do when they're assessing a beer sample, and I want to teach you all how to do that for when you want to, really examine a beer and take a closer look at it. I also want to have you save a little bit of each beer for the end. I mean, if you were able to drink all 3 of these in an hour, I would be like both impressed and very scared for you. But in case you're very thirsty this morning, please just save a little bit, because we're going to kind of revisit them. So we're going to use the app Sample Aux, and that will allow us to kind of, even though we're all in hundreds of different rooms around the country, we can all kind of come together using that app to share what we tasted in the beer. So JT, if you want to give a little overview of the brewing program here before we get started, just so they kind of have some context for why YCH has a brewing program and what we use it for. I think that would be good context.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as she mentioned, we have our little brewery. It's a little 1.5 barrel Blickman setup. It's cool. We have eight fermenters, little 1 barrel fermenters that we can kind of go in. And where it's really neat, especially at a place like YCH, is a big part of my job is just trying out different hops, finding the usage for them, finding out where they're best used, their best practices. And it's neat on like a little small system. We can do one batch, split it into 6 different fermenters and try a different dry hop in each, for example. Or and this is kind of where the sensory team kind of hops in too, which is really, really nice having just a trained sensory panel of a bunch of blind testers. Is I can do something like, you know, like I said, a dry hop trial where I can do the same base and just dry hop them different. Or I can do something like, if I just want to attempt to just change my mash intent, change my day that I'm dry hopping on active fermentation versus late fermentation. All of those make a difference, and it's really, really nice to be able to brew these beers, send them up to a blind panel, know that they are all trained on this sample ox that we're going to be using today, and trained on the lexicon that we all can kind of share. And then that way I know I can kind of get my information back based on these beers and only make them better, only be able to show that off to the brewers that I go see from there, and know that when they have a question of, hey, how do I use this hop? How do I, where do I dry hop with it? What are its best uses? I can have those answers and be able to show them off. And a lot of that comes from the sensory program that we built here. So.
Yeah, it's a dream team, I have to say. I love being a part of it.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry, our boss, I'm going to throw in a joke. Our boss always says that we're trying to build the Power Rangers, like, ultimate robot thing, where one person's the left arm, one person's the right, all coming from different backgrounds, all with different abilities and knowledge, and just together we're just building this ultimate machine that it's really, really nice. We're a pretty well-oiled machine at this point, so we're doing good things.
I love that analogy. Okay, so I think we should pull out our first beer. I think everyone is wondering why we haven't yet, and that's fair, but here we are. So it's going to be the In the Loop. And while everyone's pouring themselves a sample, please, again, pour it, but don't taste it. I know I'm asking a lot. I know. I'm very aware. But we're building to the moment, it's going to be worth it. And while we're just kind of making sure we all have a little bit of a sample in a cup, I'll let JT tell you a little bit about Veilbreaker and about this beer specifically, the In the Loop series, because it's quite an interesting beer. It's very fun. Everyone go ahead and pour yourselves a little sample.
Cool. Yeah, so as you guys have probably noticed, a little bit of a trend with the beers we sent you. They're all, well, we really wanted to try to show off the Yakima Valley a little bit in the beers that we're able to produce out of here. Just because we really are a mecca of hops, really in the world, which is just something so neat that just so specific to our area. So we wanted to show off a couple of the big ones who do a lot of good things for the Yakima Valley, who help out our community, and in turn we wanted to make sure that we help them out as well. Veilbreaker being a really big part of that. They've been around, they're fairly new. I want to say that they've been around since 2013 or 2014. But already they're like the #3 brewery in terms of barrelage in Washington, which is in craft brewing, which is really neat. But the In the Loop series is a fun one that we do every year with them. And it's kind of to show off, it started off to show off our lupulin series, our cryo, where we will pull all the lupulin, use that in the beers. So a lot of what we will use in there is a lot of lupulin in there. But this one is more, we wanted to make more of a floral, kind of nice, showing off Laurel, Atanum, and then our new one that just got named recently, which is Talus, which most of you guys might know as 692, but recently got renamed Talus, which is a big reason we really wanted to show off this beer. I won't give you guys any sensory notes on it, but I'll talk a little bit more about the brewery and just kind of talk about them. So they are, I believe, probably the only brewery, at least that I know of, that owns their own hop field. So they have pick of the litter in terms of the hops that they want to use. Owned by Kevin Quinn, Megan Quinn, and then Kevin Smith. Everybody knows him as Smitty, but they're all just awesome, awesome people. Their dad, their whole family has been in the hop industry for decades and decades and decades. Their dad is even one of the owners of YCH. So it's a pretty neat thing. This is a cool yearly thing that we do with them, the In the Loop series. So we try to make it a little different every year. And yeah, this is this year's version of it. So
Thanks, Stacey.
Yeah, of course.
So no cheers yet, because
no cheers. Sorry.
I'm such a disciplinarian when it comes to drinking beer. I'm actually going to share my screen and just take you guys through the Sample Ops app. I'm sure that a lot of people who are with us today probably have used it before, but just in case you haven't, I want to show you how to navigate to our event within the app. And there I am, yep. And so if you just open the app, and it's going to be on the home screen. So if you open the app, this is what you should see. And if you just scroll down, you will see our event, Sensory Flavor and Beer with Yakima Chief Hops. So if you just click on that event, it'll bring up the samples that we're going to be assessing today. And just by way of a little tour of how to use the app, well, first of all, they have the liking score first. I'm going to have you guys hold off on that until after we've gone through all the tasting, because I want to take you through kind of some of the steps of tasting. But basically, you just come through and you rate all of these different characteristics using these sliding scales. And when you come down to flavors, this is where I feel like it maybe there's a little explanation. So to input aromas and flavors, you hit that plus sign and it'll bring up this menu. And each of these kind of parent aromas and flavors, or like major complexes, if you click on them, you can kind of drill down a little bit more. So for example, if you tasted the beer and you thought it was fruity, you would want to tick fruity there on the right. And then you can drill down even further. So say it was citrus, you'd want to also tick citrus on the right and then select, your more specific citrus descriptors. And basically all of these will expand out into more potential descriptors. And you just go through, and as you're tasting, the first taste, the first smell, the first taste, the second taste, as you go through, you might pick up more and more different things. Make sure to tick the major complex or the parent aroma as well as the minor ones. That's kind of helpful because, if JT gets black tea and I get green tea, but we both make sure to tick herbaceous, then at least we know that there's kind of consensus there. And that's it, and then we'll go through. So, drum roll please, the moment we've all been waiting for. Let's go ahead and assess these beers. So, the first step that I tell panelists to do is what I call like the drive-through or the drive-by. So you just pass the beer under your nose, like 6 inches away, like really keep some space there, because you actually are going to probably be able to get some aromas out of the beer even this far away from your face. And those are going to be the really volatile aroma compounds. They're jumping out of the beer. They're traveling really high. They're often very delicate. And so if you just go right in with your nose straight into the glass, you might just get kind of blasted by some of the other aromas that are in the beer, and you might miss some of these kind of more delicate things. So I like to just kind of pass it under like this a few times. And if you're detecting anything at that point, it's a good time to put it in. And then the next step is to bring the glass a little bit closer. And my panelists always laugh at me for this, but I call them little bunny sniffs, because it's just like short little, like quick, like not a really long inhale. It's like you picture a little bunny like going like that. Oh, adorable. You can look that adorable too if you do little bunny sniffs into your beer. So the reason you don't want to do a huge long sniff right away is for the same reason that you start with the beer far away. As we get closer, we're getting kind of the heavier, less delicate aromas. And to assess them in stages is helpful for kind of like parsing them out. The next stage would be to kind of give it a swirl. You could even cover it if you really want to trap those aromatic compounds and make sure you get a really good kind of concentration of them. And then the third sniff is going to be your deep, long sniff where, I get my nose right in there. I take a really long inhale. And that's going to give you kind of the fullest like profile of the beer, and you're going to be able to get a lot more of the subtle aromas that you might have not been able to detect from farther away or with those shorter sniffs. So as you're doing that at home, please make sure you're filling out your sample aux and letting us know what you smell and taste. So after that, we're going to kind of compare all of our answers, which should be interesting. So as for tasting, you start with just a little sip, just a little baby sip. And if there's anything that jumps out, it's good to note it. That first sip is going to be your kind of most powerful chance to detect flavor, because your palate hasn't been kind of meddled with the bitterness and all the other stuff that's going on. I think a really good strategy is to, and this kind of like sounds a little complicated, and I know you probably think I'm way overcomplicating drinking beer, and I'm not recommending doing any of this in the pub with your friends, but all that being said, I like to take a big inhale, take a sip, and then exhale through my nose. So if you try to do that.
The retronasal.
Retronasal.
Yes, Denny, thank you. So there are so many olfactory nerves in the back of your nose that don't really get as targeted when you sniff it from the front. So basically, if you swallow and exhale, it'll bring a bunch of those volatile aromatic compounds from kind of your throat out through your nose. And there's a lot of compounds that this is the only way I can detect them in beer. So I could smell a sample all day and never detect it, but as soon as I swallow it and exhale, it like comes immediately to the forefront. True.
Is this kind of the same as like the burp?
Maybe, yeah,
I don't know if that makes any difference or not.
We've considered adding the burp to our, our analysis routine. So what do you taste when you burp it back up? But there's a lot of uncontrolled variables in the burp. What did you have for lunch? We just can't execute it in a scientific way yet. We're working on it. And then, yeah?
We have a question.
Sure.
What kind of glasses are you guys using? And do you recommend certain types of glasses for doing sensory?
Yeah, this is my favorite type of glass to drink beer out of, like basically any style. I actually can't remember what the name of this specific, like all glass shapes have a specific name. I can't remember what this one is. It might be like a brandy snifter or something, or those might be smaller. But anyway, it's like a big globe. And the reason that this is really nice for me is I feel like I can get a really good visual on the beer. I can swirl it recklessly without worrying about things flying out because of the way it's curved. And because of the way it's curved, it's going to trap a lot of those aromatics inside of the glass and really concentrate them for me. So I don't have to do as much like of that on my own, like covering the glass. The aromatics are going to kind of come up and they're going to like resettle, and they're just like really fancy and fun looking, which I think is worth something in and of itself. What are Drew and Denny? What are you guys drinking out of?
I'm using a glass from the Zythos Beer Fest in Leuven, Belgium, Belgium's largest beer festival, and it has this very special property. I can make it disappear.
Incredible.
Got to prove it.
Not bad, huh? Now I'll have to make the beer disappear.
Yeah, now you have to prove it.
Now, and I'm using, this is from Brewing America, and they call it a muffin top. I've seen this glass done under other names as well. One of the things I like about it is it's got a nice little column here to kind of hold back, and then it comes up into this bowl shape. The same reason why you guys like to use a snifter, and so that way I can, and also because it's that open, I can bury my face in it.
Yeah, that's great. That's interesting. So do you hold it by that little small part at the bottom? Yeah. Ergonomic.
Yeah, it's a really good drinking glass too.
Yeah, it is. That's my favorite, just glass for drinking,
I think, Drew, that little lip, I think that's supposed to kind of help agitate the beer as well as you're drinking out of it. So it kind of gives it another little layer of flavor as you're drinking.
Well, and also
it's got an etched bottom.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah.
They also do that for nucleation as well. And then just to hold on to aroma in between, I'm foil capping.
I love it.
Smart. Yeah, so I've always heard these guys called Tulip Glasses. I don't know if that's the scientific name or anything like that, but I mean, you can tell by the shape. It's same sort of idea like Tessa was saying. It almost kind of funnels all of that. And the cool thing is it's so wide at the base that it allows a huge surface area. So when you're, swirling in something like that, it allows the most surface for that aroma to escape. And then it all just funnels right towards the top. So it's almost kind of like it shoots it, kind of shotguns it right into your nose a little bit.
An aroma cannon.
Yeah, an aroma cannon. That's a good one.
Well, by the way, I did want to say, like, when I cracked open this can, to your point about like those drive-bys or drive-throughs from way far away, even through that tiny little opening on the top of the can, this thing blasted hops at me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of nice.
I think everyone's probably finishing up doing their assessments at home. So I think we can probably talk a little bit about the flavor without hopefully biasing them too much.
We do have one question that's in the Q&A there. It says, I can't change options between aroma and taste on sample locks.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. So here's the thing is that something I always really like to remind panelists, and I think it's a really important aspect of beer sensory, is that the terms flavor and taste are often used kind of interchangeably, but we really have three things here, which is aroma, taste, and then flavor, which is those two things combined, in my opinion. So your nose is actually capable of detecting hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of individual distinct aromas, which is incredible. We are so powerful at what we're capable of detecting, kind of orthonasally. Our tongue is actually really dumb. It can only do 5. It can only do 5 tastes. It's, you're sweet, you're salty, you're bitter, you're sour, and you're umami, which is the newest one. And so your tongue is actually like not that powerful of a tool as far as really getting into nuance. And what flavor is sort of the combination of those two things. So an exercise that I really like to do people often don't believe me. They think like, oh, my tongue is definitely tasting pear or, something more specific than that. But a really interesting thing you can do at home is if you have like a jelly belly or a jelly bean or something, and you close your nose, you plug your nose and put the jelly belly in your mouth and eat it, you will not be able to tell what flavor it is. Absolutely not. It will taste sweet. It maybe tastes a little bit sour. As soon as you release your nose, suddenly it's immediately obvious what flavor it is. So it really is that retronasal assessment that is providing you with the nuances of flavor. All of that being said, the reason that the flavors are more, you can get down into all the different flavors kind of more specifically, is because that is kind of the combination of taste and smell. But you can see that on sample ox, so under taste, we're talking sweet, salty, sour, and bitter. Those are the tastes that you are allowed to assess. So if you experience it as peach or bubblegum or whatever, go ahead and put that in that aroma flavors. We're not going to make the distinction between whether you smelled it when you were sniffing versus whether you experienced it when you took your sip.
Hey Tessa, when you are sipping, how much does like external things play a difference when you're running sensory? Like external things?
Like the environment?
Like the environment, yeah, everything like that.
I can't overstate how essential like controlling the environment is when you're doing sensory for science. Like obviously drinking beer for an enjoyment purpose, like you don't want to sit in a white booth with nothing around you and not speaking to anyone. You would do consumer testing if that was the environment you were interested in. But what we have is a row of booths. Everyone's separated. It's all white. We actually use red lighting. One of my favorite interesting anecdotes to explain why we use red lighting is there have been studies that have done funny things like putting a couple drops of brown food coloring into Bud Light and giving it to people, and people will say, oh, it's so chocolatey, I'm getting coffee notes, because they're so conditioned when they see that color to expect those kind of flavors and aromas to come through, like that you wouldn't expect from a dark beer. And when we are doing sensory, like for science, we don't want anyone to be biased by any visual information that they're getting. So we keep them in like booths, red lighting. It's like sensory deprivation. All they can use is like their sense of smell and taste, so that we can get like the cleanest data possible. Yeah, it plays a huge role. Your mood, what you ate earlier that day, who you're with. That's why sensory is really actually a very difficult science. There's so many external factors that can impact your experience of a sample. So we spend a lot of time trying to mitigate those things, but we can only do so much.
So does that explain why the forest fire about 8 miles away from me is making everything taste like a Rauch IPA?
Yeah.
I think it could partially be responsible for explaining that, yes. I'm kind of jealous. I miss Rauch beer.
I wish more people liked Rauch beer, but every brewer I know who's ever made one, it's pretty much sat there for 6 months.
Yeah,
You know,
it's not everyone's taste to drink liquid bacon, but I'm a big fan.
yeah, when I get nerd for one, I just lick an ashtray.
Boo. Boo.
Yeah, boo, boo, boo. Okay, I think, so save some of that sample back, unless you just sesh that whole can, in which case, again, I'm impressed. But at the end, we're going to go through and kind of compare everyone's assessment. So it's good to keep a little bit back, so that if like everyone in the group said, oh, I got major cedar notes, and you didn't get cedar notes, then you can kind of come in and be like, let me see if I can find that note that I missed that everyone else had consensus on. Okay, so up next.
One I'm excited about.
I'm really excited about this one.
Oh, we should also mention, sorry to interrupt. We should mention that you guys will see that everybody got 2 of the In the Loops. That was not by mistake. We were originally only going to do 3. We figured we'd throw in a little extra bonus can for everybody who joined. So
Thank you.
The box holds 4. Why the hell not?
Why the hell
Yeah,
not?
it would have looked really lame if we had just sent 3 and there was like an empty.
Really, man, we would have like been talking about how cheap and cheesy you guys
Exactly. We can't have that.
And now we can talk about how wonderful and generous you are.
There you go.
Exactly. This is the narrative we're trying to encourage.
Right.
So yeah, everyone go ahead and pour yourself a little sample of this Single Hill Ecstasy of Green. So this beer I've had to write this down in different places, to plan this event. And I can't spell the word ecstasy. I will never be able to spell that word. What is going on with that? I spell it wrong every single time, and I spell it wrong in a different way every single time. And I don't think I've ever once spelled it correctly on the first shot. So
A mark of
cheers
creativity.
to autocorrect.
Cheers.
So again, we're gonna be nerds. We're gonna be beer nerds about it. So let's see what we're getting, farther away, and then we're gonna move slowly closer, shifting our sniffs from shorter to longer. It's sort of a dance you do with your beer before you drink it. It's a beautiful sensory dance. And then we'll take our little sip. We'll do our retronasal by inhaling, taking a sip, and then exhaling through the nose. All the while filling out our ballots on sample aux so that we can all compare our assessments at the end. And I'll go ahead and, while everyone's doing that, let JT talk a little bit about Single Hill and this beer specifically.
Yeah, definitely. So Single Hill, they're a pretty new one in Yakima. They are doing a lot of really good things. They started up, in my opinion, they did things the right way. They focused on quality. They focused on the people. They've been doing really, really good things. I think they only opened up in 2018. So they're still pretty brand new, but like I said, they're doing good things. The cool thing about this beer in particular is it's a fresh hop, which is pretty Northwest specific in terms of, to make a beer a fresh hop, it needs to come straight from the farm, directly harvested, and then pretty much straight into a beer from there. Usually we try to get it within 24 hours. We say up to 48, maybe even 72 to still have it be considered a fresh hop, but at that point, you're probably going to be pulling a little bit more of those vegetal notes, things like that. I'll try not to get too in depth on the flavors of it, but yeah, this was from farm to glass, or from farm to brew within, they're right down the street, so they probably got it within the hour from the time it was pulled from the vine. A little bit about the history of what Single Hill is and kind of their namesake. So that is single hill is in reference to our breeding program, or just, you know, agriculture breeding in general. For hops specifically, think of any hop. You think of Citra, you think of, you know, the new Talus, you think of Simcoe, any of them. They all start on what's known as a single hill. So that is where you combine you combine a male plant with a female plant, crossbreed them, grow it. So that is where the single hill comes from. From there, we'll, you know, crossbreed more, take notes based on that. And it's usually about a 10-year process for a hop starting from this single hill to actually be able to get a name and grown on a mass production. So yeah, usually it's about anywhere from like 8 to 12 years. I believe Talus was about 10. But yeah, it's a neat thing because you think about all these hops that are just everywhere, that are the big hops, like I said, the Citrus, Simcoes, Mosaics, they all started on one single hill. So that's kind of the fun thing about that. And these guys they're just good people too. It always makes it nice to want to kind of help out just good people. So enjoy, drink up, cheers.
Yeah, this is a really special beer. Fresh hop beer, like JT said, it only comes but once a year, and it only comes but once a place. Is that the new marketable phrase for this? I think probably not, but yeah, it's super location specific. It's a real treat to drink one of these. So yeah, this is.
I was gonna say, I think to me this is the first time I've ever had a fresh hop beer that in some way, shape, or form didn't taste like grass clippings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing. There isn't a hint of it, but it's not overwhelming like a lot of them are.
Yeah, I also find that fresh hop beers can drift into kind of a tobacco-y zone that I don't know if it's especially bad, but it's not especially good for me. And this one doesn't even come close to treading that direction.
Well, and I think just for everybody's edification, I mean, so fresh hops, I mean, you guys are literally taking those straight off the vine without doing any real processing on them other than picking the cones off, right? So there's no drying, there's nothing. They're wet things.
80% water.
Yeah, which is kind of half the joy and half the struggle of it. You know, it's hard to find anything really super quantifiable in the numbers of how you brew. Like, you really can't dial in your IBUs too much. You can't really, you know, with it being 80% water, you really need to dial in your pH. A whole bunch of those things make a huge difference in the fresh hop beer. And that's kind of like I said, it's the fun and the struggle of it. So,
well, it seems like, you know, okay, so sour beer has a lot of sort of, you know, chances that you're taking, right, with what's happening with the various bugs that you're using. And I mean, we have a lot of stuff on regular brewing that's sort of dialed in, but it seems like wet hops are giving you a little bit of that risk factor back into regular brewing.
Definitely.
Yeah. There's no data sheet that tells you the alpha percentage, so you're just kind of on a wing and a prayer with that as well. So, yeah.
But they make great beers though too. So.
Well, and I was at I think I went there last year. It's right around the corner from the hotel, right? The Maison.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly.
And it's a very clean and wide open space that they have there as well. It's very inviting if there's not a pandemic going on.
And it was jammed the night we went there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's like we got a little video of a harvest. Picking the hop cones off, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, so you'll see they come in those binds, and yeah, it's pretty much we'll pull them, run them right through the picking plant, and then it's directly into cold storage from there, and then hopefully, like I said, within 24 hours, right into a beer. And actually, if shameless plug, but earlier in the virtual harvest season, a couple weeks ago, we did a virtual harvest presentation with Steve Luke of Cloudburst. If you guys want to kind of jump in and take a look at that.
And this is actually Varietal right here, getting their fresh hops. That's the crew from Varietal right back here.
Nice.
Oh yeah.
Well, and I'm trying to remember, didn't you guys do a fresh hop beer to Korea last year? Like, there was like all sorts of incredible paperwork and logistics going on in order to get the hops there in time.
Yeah, insane logistics, but very cool.
Definitely. And we're doing a lot of that's kind of where my focus has been on this last month of working on fresh hops, trying to figure out if there are ways to, like, we've been doing some like cryogenically freezing with nitrogen of some of these hops and seeing if we can smash them up, seeing if they can actually hold for a little bit. Because how nice would that be to be able to get some of these fresh hops out to the East Coast, or like you said, out overseas, and still be able to give that fresh, just clean flavor of what a fresh hop should be. So there's a lot of fun things we can do with it. We're still playing around, but we're gonna dial it in. We want these out to the masses. So
I like that idea. And I'm obviously not in sales, so this isn't not where my heart is. But I also really like that it's such a special thing. Like I don't think it would ever be something that would be available to the masses, like really truly. But I just think it's really special. It makes this time of year so fun, and it makes being in Yakima so fun, which is why it's so sad we can't have everyone out this year, because it really, the Fresh Hop Beer Festival that we have here, which is obviously not happening this year, but I don't know if there's anywhere in the world that you can go and sample that many fresh hop beers, and it's really special.
Well, I guess in a way, fresh hops are the Beaujolais Nouveau of the beer world.
Yes, I like that.
There you go.
All right, I think we can go ahead and move on to our third beer, and then we'll have them all in front of us, and we can kind of start talking a bit about comparing the flavors and so forth. But this is, speaking of Varietal, who you just saw getting their fresh hops. This isn't a fresh hop beer, but this is the Varietal. It's called Mithril Clouds, which is a fun little Lord of the Rings reference, which is awesome. So yeah, go ahead and crack that bad boy open and get it in your glass.
Well, and if anybody wants to have a Lord of the Rings reference, we should all ask Denny about his band.
Oh, what's it called?
It was called Mithrander.
Nice.
that's pretty good.
I dig it.
Yeah. We were the hottest band in the Pacific Northwest for about 5 years, 40 years ago. 45 years ago.
You're gonna have to play Hop and Brew School next year.
The only thing I play these days is ukulele, and it's only for the laugh factor.
Yeah, trust me, you don't want him playing ukulele.
No, you really
Comedy
don't.
ukulele.
Ukulele is bad enough, but sometimes I start singing, and oh my God, you don't want to hear that.
I think I might want to hear that.
Yeah.
No. Ask Brew.
You are a sensory expert. We want to make sure that you actually can maintain full use of all your senses. So I highly recommend not to.
Might damage my ears.
And who knows what that will do to your ability to sense the beer.
Oh man, I could talk about that. There's been so many interesting studies with sensory and music. I won't go into it. I'm not fun at parties.
Give us the quick version of it, because that sounds interesting.
Well, just the gist of it is that different music will cause you to perceive things as differing levels of sweet and like spicy and stuff like that. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's like been.
That might explain the one time when I went to my favorite pub and they were playing nothing but heavy metal music, all the beer tasted weird to me.
We just had a heavy metal party here at YCH. I mean, it was like a Zoom party, but we drank dark beer and listened to heavy metal on the fall equinox. Because why not?
Why not?
JT, do you want to tell us a little bit about Varietal and this beer?
So Varietal is another Yakima Valley. They are based out of Sunnyside. They're another fairly new one, but a lot of good people are part of it. So the cool thing about that is Sunnyside is where our biggest plant, our biggest pelleting plant is. So most of our employees that are at Yakima Chief are actually down in Sunnyside as opposed to Yakima. So Varietal started up, they're still pretty young, but a few of their owners actually used to work for Yakima Chief. A couple still do. But they come from the brewing background. I know Chris came from Bale Breaker. He was there at the start. Chad came from Snipes Mountain. Yeah, they just from around they've been in the Yakima beer industry for a good while Yakima has really been kind of building up. So when Varietal started trying to, build and get going, the city of Sunnyside or the town of Sunnyside was actually really, really a big factor in that they wanted to really make sure that they took care of their community. And in return, the community really helped them out in return by helping them get that start, by helping them, because they knew that it would be a symbiotic relationship back and forth. So varietal, they're really neat. They do a lot of really, funky is the wrong word, but they do a lot of like cool experimental hops, and they do cool beers, and they try new things. And you guys will see that in this beer. It's really a badass beer, but it's definitely different from the other two in a really cool way. And they nail it on their hops, I think. So they're a fun one. Get your hands on some varietal if you can. They do good things.
The can art is quite fun.
Nail their can art. And they have a good time with it too, which is what beer's all about. And everybody, Drew, Denny, you guys can probably add on to this, but really that's just kind of the love of beer. Just try things, have fun with it. And it's just they have fun with it, which I really, really enjoy. And like you can see, like, by naming it after Lord of the Rings reference, they're cool. They keep it light, but they focus on their quality, and they just make really awesome stuff.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that our motto has always been to tell people, brew the things that you love to brew, and brew in a way that makes you enjoy it. And it doesn't matter if you're brewing right, as long as you're enjoying it and enjoying what you get out the other side of it. If you're having fun, I think a lot of times the fun gets reflected in the final product too.
Yeah, I agree. After 22 years of brewing and all those batches, I now find that I brew less for the beer and more for the enjoyment of brewing. But I think that makes the beer turn out better because I'm not stressing over it. There's so many homebrewers stress over their brewing, and what's going to happen and all that kind of stuff. If you are stressing over homebrewing, then you're doing something wrong. It's supposed to be a relaxing, fun endeavor, and then I think if it is, then that shows up in your beer.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Drew.
I was going to say, not to bias anybody, but I do like the way the mosaic is showing up in this.
Comes through. Yeah, it
definitely
comes through. Yeah, and I think varietal, and really all three of these, I think they all just nail the, if any of you guys, make it out to Yakima Chief, go out to these breweries that we, showcase today, because all three of them, I think, really nailed the ability to, like we were saying, have fun with it, but just their quality as well is their number one thing. So they really kind of cracked the code in finding that nice balance between the two, and I think they're doing really, really good stuff out here in Yakima.
So do we have enough opinions in to talk about the beer itself?
I'm still waiting on people to finish this last sample. I'm monitoring the results live, and then I'll pull that screen up, and we can kind of go through and just see what everyone said, which from what I'm seeing so far should be pretty interesting. And don't forget to give everything that liking test that's at the top. The neither like nor dislike, you can slide it. It's got the little emoji scale, which I think is very fun and friendly. So make sure to let us know how you felt about each beer, and then we can crown a winner at the end, which should be kind of fun.
Yes, and by the way, to keep it Yakima Valley related, I have a nice little box of Leota May sitting over there from Bale Breaker that I'm using to actually hold my leftovers.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. Leota May is one of my favorites. It's one of my go-tos.
Oh yeah, Brian was kind enough to send us a care package from Bale Breaker. I opened the first can of Top Cutter, and the first thing that my head went to is that smells exactly like when I visit a hop farm, and I'm standing next to all the drying hops.
Well, and actually,
Good smell.
I think that's a really good point, because I know that obviously this year it's all virtual, and I don't know how many people on the call have grown their own hops, for instance, at home. But I do think, like, when you get a chance to walk around those acres upon acres of fields and be amongst tens of thousands of plants, when you come back and you taste an IPA, it's like suddenly you get a whole different sensory experience just from plugging into those memories of being amongst the plants and smelling what that whole yard smells like.
That's true. Yep.
Absolutely. I know for me, being a part of, I run the beer sensory panel, but I am a panelist on the hop sensory panel. So I assess hops for the hop sensory panel, and we assess every single lot that comes in for harvest. So it's like literally thousands of samples that we end up smelling. And there has been nothing better for my kind of beer sensory chops than just smelling hops all day, every day. You know, you really get into that like minutia of what hops are really bringing to the table, which is a cool experience.
Well, that actually brings up real quick. That brings up an interesting point, because when we did the hop sensory class, one of the big questions that was out there was, hey, so what changes between what you're getting
Just
in the
what
hop
I was
sensory
going to say. Yep.
Yeah, versus what you guys are doing now on the beer side? And like, have you guys ever experienced like a radical shift? Like JT, have you ever gone to brew a beer thinking a hop was going to do one thing, and then when you get out the other side of it, you're like, well, no, that's giving me something completely different, for instance?
Oh, absolutely. And there's a lot of hops in particular. Like the one that comes to mind especially is Equinox. So I brew with Equinox, and when I smell it, especially in the cryo form, you kind of can smell that, and it's just, it wants to kind of give off a peppery flavor. So I went into Equinox, and truthfully, once I got this job, I went into it not being super, super excited about it on the hop side, but then you get it into the brewing side, and it just gives off just like a huge like fruit punch flavor, especially in that cryo form of just, it's turned into one of my absolute favorites. And a lot of that is kind of where the sensory and the brewing kind of comes into play, of just where and how to use these hops. We get them, and that's where it's nice. Like we get the hop sensory in, and we can kind of have an idea of like, okay, it gives off these characteristics. Where can we try to find a place to put those in? It gives off these oils. Where can we try to find a place to put those in? But they play different. They play different with each other, and they play different with when you blend them with other hops. Like some Sabro, for example, is a really, really good one. You smell that hop, and it's awesome. It's really, really neat, and it's like almost to the point where it's like if we were to do a single hill Sabro, or sorry, not single hill, but a single hop Sabro, it's almost a little too aggressive. That's one I found that it's like use a light hand, blend that with others. It's almost like a Merlot. Oh my God, cute. So it's almost like a Merlot in wine, where it's like it's a great hop. You use it, it's awesome on its own, but if you blend that with others, it's only going to bring itself up as well as those other hops that you're blending it with. And that's been a really, really fun thing. So that's been a cool part of, finding out how they play in sensory and what people are pulling from them. Because I'll even brew a beer with a thing in mind, and I'll get the sensory notes back, and it's different. And it's like, oh, crazy, that's only from how that hop played in boil side and hot side versus cold side and the dry hop. Which is really, really neat. And there's definitely some hops that are better hot side versus cold side. A Pato, for example, or like I said, you get any of the old school nobles, a lot of those will kind of play towards that way. But yeah, it's a neat thing. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, that's sort of like the $1 million question for our team is trying to track the evolution of hop characteristics into beer. And we've kind of accidentally coined this term survivables, which refers to the compounds that will actually, like when detected in a hop sample by GCMS, will actually still be present in the final beer. They won't have evaporated, biotransformed, or whatever. There's so much, the brewing process is so dynamic chemically that these compounds get kicked around in so many different ways. Denny's on this feeling. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm having fun here.
Is that Sports Center?
Well, I'm wondering, you guys were talking about the survivables.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's going to drive not only the Idaho 7 and all that, but also the Brewer's Gold, which was a name that I saw pop up in that list that was like, wait, that's an old name.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been quite a few hops that you like just really would have discounted, or that aren't like really fashionable right now or whatever, that are really like strong in a lot of what this is research that's very much in its nascency right now. It's something we're pursuing kind of at all times to better describe what's happening. But still, yeah, the early results are pretty interesting. And the other kind of holy grail of sensory is just being able to actually correlate those compounds then with the sensory experience, because there's so much going on in any given beer sample that there's so many antagonistic, synergistic reactions that just because a compound is there in this concentration doesn't mean that someone's going to perceive it in the same way if there's different background beer there. So it's really messy and complicated, but very interesting.
Very cool.
All right, so are we ready to see kind of what the group said about these beers, and then we can sort of talk about the flavor a bit and maybe answer some questions as well while we do that. I'm gonna go
throw in your questions, guys. If you have any, please throw them in.
Well, we got a question here. Is there a way to leave the results up on Ox so we can go back in and look at them later? And I think you can. There's a little ribbon down the bottom.
I hate to be this person, but you guys are seeing this bar graph here, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, good. Always need to double check. So this is the bale breaker in the loop, and if everyone wants to go ahead and kind of grab that sample back, top it up, whatever you need to do, so you have a little bit of extra beer, and we can go through and see what everyone said. So let's start with the visual. Seems like there's pretty good consensus on dark yellow. This is flavor in beer, so we don't really need to dwell on this too much, but I just wanted people to be able to compare what they said against what everyone else said. And yeah, clear as a bell. I think that's pretty accurate. So the aroma, what we were kind of talking mostly about, looks like grapefruit took the lead. So if you didn't get grapefruit in this beer, this might be a good opportunity to go ahead and stick your nose back in and see if you can find it. Did you guys get grapefruit?
I'm trying to remember.
A little bit. I got like orange and lemon, which is kind of like grapefruit, right?
Yeah, it's on the citrus.
I'd almost go citrus piss on this one. Like it's a little bit more bitey than.
Yeah, almost more like the rind of it.
Yeah.
Which is cool. It kind of plays well with the bitterness. I get a lot of like really floral notes, almost like a rose water kind of flavor to it.
Interesting. Yeah, you have a little bit of consensus with you on that. It looks like 5 people said floral, 3 people said rose. That's interesting. I think the next big category was tropical. Woody, every time I drink this beer, I think that's what jumps out to me personally the most. For me, it's cedar, but it looks like more people said pine.
Well, Tessa, let me ask, so with like grapefruit and pine in particular, writing it up so high in this, I mean, I think a lot of us are trained to think, oh, hey, these hops are grapefruity or they're piney or that, and those are very common descriptors. Do you feel like sometimes that amount of knowledge that, like particularly a lot of the lay market or homebrewers would have in terms of vocabulary drives some of these choices that you see here when we're using a program like this?
Yeah, probably, definitely. I mean, that's just another kind of, maybe you could consider it an environmental bias. That's why when we do sensory with scientific goals in mind, no one ever knows what they're drinking. It's all completely blind, because those influences are so strong. And I know, I mean, I'm guilty of it. If someone tells me this is a mosaic hop, I'm immediately going in looking for some specific characteristics that I am certain I will find. And if someone, when we do our harvest sensory, it's all blind. So sometimes they'll be like, oh, this is a really interesting citra. And then I'll go look at what it actually was. And I'm like, oh, it wasn't a citra at all. That's why it was so interesting. So it's important if you want good data to not know ahead of time anything about the sample you're assessing. But, in the real world, that's not what people experience. People often have access to information about the beer or the hop that they're assessing, and that's just normal. But I do think that impact is pretty important.
All right, and we got a question that came in and says, along that lines, what is the best way to expose yourself to flavors in beer? For instance, I'm familiar with pine, but not with cedar. Is there a way besides pine cedar wood to expose yourself to flavors present in the beer?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's something we actually talk a lot about in our sensory program, because in order to train panelists, we have to be able to give them examples of each aroma or flavor that we're expecting them to be able to identify. And so we spend a lot of time kind of looking out in the world. There are so many different ways you can do this. There are chemical reference standards. So there's like certain compounds that tend to be associated with a flavor. Beta pinene is very piney, but a pine tree has a lot more going on than just that one compound. So it's not always a one-to-one comparison with those chemical reference standards. So one thing that we've been doing a lot that's quite useful and kind of good for the everyday person is essential oils. So, you know, however you feel about them, but you can get a cedar and a pine essential oil, and you can smell them side by side. You can put a couple of drops on a tissue and wave it around in front of your face. Essential oils are actually that thing that they're describing, like distilled down. So, you know, for citrus categories, for woody categories, that's been something that's been really helpful for me. I know I got like a cedar essential oil that I was putting in my humidifier, and now if there's cedar in anything, I can detect it so fast because I filled my home with that aroma for a couple of days, and now it's like in my brain in a really strong way. So I find that like a pretty accessible thing. I mean, you can get essential oils anywhere, and for most of these descriptors, they exist.
Well, and just real quick, I mean, you mentioned some of the flavor compound kits. So like a lot of homebrewers and homebrew clubs can get access to like a BJCP flavor compound kit. And I will also, my wife does a lot with essential oils, and I will caution people that if you get them, unless you know that it's safe for ingestion, stick to smelling.
Oh yeah, there are food grade essential oils, but if it doesn't explicitly say that, please don't drink essential oils. Please don't ever drink anything that doesn't say it's explicitly food grade. That's a good caveat, Drew. I appreciate that.
I figured, you know, better safe than sorry to make sure that people remembered that one.
But like I said, it's really your nose that's predominantly responsible for most of these things. So you shouldn't have to really be drinking them. And honestly, they would probably bring such a bitter, astringent flavor to anything you might dose them into that it might become a moot point at that point. But we've done that. We've put food grade essential oils into beer and trained panelists on them. So it's an option. I've just pulled up the Single Hill Ecstasy of Green. The word ecstasy does not have an X in it, everyone. Remember, there's no X in ecstasy.
It depends on what you're talking about.
So sorry to kind of jump back to what we were just talking about too, of just like how do you expose yourself. But that's one thing Tessa and the rest of the sensory team has put a lot of work into, is how to train a sensory panel where we're all, when we each say cedar, we are all, you know, because not only is it hard to pick out what cedar is, but it's especially hard to get an entire panel of, I don't know how many do we have who are actually like past the sensory training, maybe 30. But it's even harder to get an entire panel of everybody to all know exactly what cedar we're talking about and what it is that we are shooting for there. So a big part of what Tessa has done is just training and things like that. And that's kind of what you guys were talking about, essential oils, but we got these little kits that they handed out to us to like train. And I found that the best way to, if you really want to know a flavor, it's to almost overexpose yourself, almost like really just give yourself like a really like heavy jolt of it. And like you're saying with the essential oils and everything, that will kind of, next time you smell it, you'll just be like, oh, I know exactly what that is. I can pull it apart. And then, you know, to get an entire panel worth of people who are able to do that is really kind of the really neat part about this. So train, best thing is to train, overexpose if you can, find essential oils, just really kind of almost like shock your senses with this smell is the best way I've learned to learn about it. So
that sounds like the more pleasant version of my bad memories with Jack Daniels and smelling it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what our sensory manager, Tiffany, always says, like, we want panelists, it's like when you see a red light, you stop, like you don't have to think about it. You see the red light and your foot goes onto the brake, hopefully. Not if you live in Yakima, apparently, but anyway, we want panelists to have the same kind of, like, they don't even have to think about it. They smell, you know, beta caryophyllene and they're, you know, cedar, you know, that's like, we want them to have that kind of almost instinctive reaction. And the only way you get that is by super repetitive exposure. So, okay, we have up the Single Hill Ecstasy of Green. It looks like grapefruit took the lead once again. Grapefruit seems to be a pretty popular descriptor. Maybe that's because we describe a lot of hops that way, I'm not sure. And we also got some tropical, but where we diverge, it looks like, is this kind of grassy stone fruit. I don't think we saw quite as much of on the previous beer, which makes perfect sense as it is a fresh hop beer. So we would expect to see some of those grassy aromas coming through. Did you guys miss any of this or feel there was other stuff that isn't represented here?
Well,
I
I
seem to
didn't.
be different than everybody.
That's going without saying, buddy.
Yeah.
But like, I didn't get the same level of. I don't think the same level of grassiness that everybody else did. I mean, I got a little bit, but not the same. But I'm really pleased to see that, like, that yeah, it's in that tropical and on like this. I think it's on the. Is it tropical? Yeah, lychee. I mean, lychee was the one that jumped out at me in like on like the second pass.
Yeah.
So I was really happy to see that I'm not alone there.
And when there's that much consensus, I mean, 6 might not seem like a lot, but when you look at the number of options that are on a ballot of this size, like, I mean, I think there are probably literally hundreds of terms people could choose. So for 6 out of 33 people, that's a significant percentage. Like, that's some strong consensus. We would consider that pretty strong consensus for one of these kind of more minor characteristics. So that's pretty cool to see.
And we did have a question in there. So it seems we're focusing on the aroma. Will we be going back to the flavor results? I assume we can show everybody like what people are getting for those sour and bitter and those compounds.
Sorry, are we talking about flavor results or are we talking about taste results?
Question says flavor. So yes.
Well, that's fine. Taste is part of flavor. Yeah, we can look at those for sure. We can go back to In the Loop and look at that. I find those less interesting just because they're so it's so simple, but it is important for sure. So, okay. So if everyone still has a sample of In the Loop, we can pick that back up and see if we agree with these assessments here. Looks like people had some pretty strong consensus really on bitterness. That's so strong. I'm actually like super impressed with everyone for aggregating so strongly on medium. I find bitterness can be tricky.
I'm concerned about the person who answered none.
That is concerning. If that was you, drink more beer is the only advice I can give you.
I'm
assuming there might have been someone who just didn't fill it out, and then I think it may stay on one. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Honestly, bitterness, like, there's huge genetic components to your ability to perceive everything basically on this list. So there are a lot of people who are pretty blind to bitterness. So you could give them a double IPA West Coast style, and you could give them a Coors Light, and they might not be able to tell you that one was more bitter than the other just because of the way that their genetics are. So ain't no shame in that game.
Sensory too. That's a cool thing about sensory too, is there really are, there's no wrong answers. Everybody's palate's different. Everybody tastes something different. Some people will love one thing and not be able to pull it from, another person will hate it. Which is kind of a big reason why just having a huge panel is neat, because everybody tastes different. It's not a wine thing where you're supposed to taste one thing or another, or else your palate's not developed enough. No, it's whatever you're tasting is what you're tasting, and that's kind of what we're shooting for.
It's a pretty big kind of debate in the sensory field of study, where you have this kind of opposing goals of, you want to kind of sort of like smooth out your panelists and make sure that everyone's data is controlled. So if one person always rates something super high and the other person always rates it super low, do you want to add kind of a correction factor to like bring them kind of into alignment, so that you know that when this person says it's a 10 and this person says it's a 3, what is typically meant is a 6 or whatever. But then on the other hand, it's like, well, people are unique and we don't want to like smooth out the differences. That's the whole point of having many people assess a sample and then like aggregating their data. So it's this kind of interesting balance between trying to kind of control for people who are at the extremes, but also accepting that is part of the population. There are people at the extremes. So it's a tricky balance between those two things.
By the way, I do want to point out that we did get a comment there that from an anonymous person saying that the none was a mistake on their part because they were still learning how to use the sample box.
I really hope we didn't shame that person. I did assume it was a mistake, but I appreciate that person for speaking out.
So, and actually there's another question in here that kind of relates to what we're talking about, but they said, I want high bitterness on the loop. I guess I would put this medium on the IPA scale of bitterness. But in my opinion, overall, this is fairly bitter compared to other styles. Should style be taken into consideration here?
That's a really good question. This Sample Ox is kind of a consumer-facing program, so it's not going to be able to kind of like tell everyone's going to bring their own kind of perceptions, their own experience into their assessments of these things. For our purposes within like our sensory program, we try to tell people to take into consideration the whole of beer, every beer you've ever tasted, whether it be a Bud Light all the way to a Ralph beer, whatever it is. And scale according to like your entire experience as a beer drinker. Same with hops. So if someone says something is a 10 out of 10 on tropical, we want them to mean that this isn't just a really tropical cascade. We want them to be saying that like, this is the most tropical hop I have ever smelled, and I don't believe that it's possible for hops to get any more tropical than this specific sample. That being said, I think people bring their own kind of perceptions. I'm not sure what Sample Ox specifically would say. I know what we tell our panelists is we're looking at the entirety of beer, the entirety of hops when we do our ratings.
Well, and so actually playing into that, there's a good question from my buddy Gavin. Hi, Gavin. And Gavin says, since sensory analysis is based purely on association through memory, do you find that early childhood sensory memories are jogged more often than ones that you've learned later in life?
Oh gosh, that's so interesting.
Really,
I feel like we need to get a psychologist in here.
I love this question because this is where I really enjoy the sensory side of things, is because when I smell, I really do pull from memory, and memory and smell are so closely related. It's like smell is like the number one thing that will just draw back a memory. So when I'm smelling, a lot of the time, I like more so like than even just picking out an aroma right away, I'll pick out a memory that smell will just bring me back to. And then from there, I'll kind of dial it in. I'm being like, okay, what is this reminding me of? Why is it reminding me of this? Like, what specific thing am I pulling from this that reminds me of this? And like a big one that I remember just off the top of my head is diesel, where I would smell it and just immediately think of like my dirt biking days of just like, why am I remembering this? What is this? And then all I could think about was dirt biking. I'm like, oh, it's probably like the exhaust, the gas flavor that you're giving off. So to speak in terms of like early childhood versus later memories, I can't really speak to that, but I do know, I will say embrace those memories as you're doing sensory, because a lot of the time that will help you narrow down what you're searching for in terms of that flavor that you're searching for.
Well,
Yeah.
I was just going to say real quick, I know one for me, there's always, I grew up pretty poor, so Hawaiian Punch was always a special treat for me when I was a kid. And so like Hawaiian Punch, that sensory version of Hawaiian Punch sticks in my head. And I cannot tell you the number of times I've told people, it's like, look, if you smell Hawaiian Punch in a beer, and I get it sometimes in these tropical beers, then describe it that way, because that's the most accurate language you can use.
It's totally valid. It's all valid.
Yeah, I once entered a beer in a competition and got a comment back that said it had a dirt aroma to it. And it took me probably 10 years to realize that the guy wasn't necessarily insulting me. He was just describing what the beer tasted or smelled like. Or maybe he was insulting me. I don't know.
Yeah. That's part of being a brewer with the sensory team too, is you can't take offense to any of this, because there's no right or wrong answer. Everything you're doing is just trying to make your beer better. So right. Yeah, the sensory team really helps with that in terms of like, hey, yeah, am I getting, a dirt flavor? Like you said, it doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. It just is a flavor people are pulling. And from there, you can kind of dial in your recipe based on that.
There's another question here that I'm kind of interested in, which is, what was the thought process in the order of the beers? Is that typically something to consider when conducting a panel?
Well, when we're conducting a panel for like research purposes, we randomize and balance the order. So it's really important to not have everyone tasting the same beer first, second, third, because there are all sorts of kind of biases and stuff that panelists will bring to that experience. So you have to randomize when you're doing a study. That being said, if you are, you know, having panelists assess a lager and a porter within the same session, I have been known to control that order just because I think that we wouldn't get very good data on the lager if someone had assessed a porter right beforehand. But for the most part, if we're doing a study, the beers are going to be similar enough that we just have to randomize. That's what we do. So that's a really different scenario than a tasting, which is where you would like go through all together. You know what the beer is. You're doing it kind of more for fun, more as a learning experience. These beers were hard to order. JT and I actually sat down and drank some of them the other day, and we're kind of debating how to do it. We had the Ecstasy of Green first initially, but when we drank that and then went to In the Loop, it tasted super weird, and we couldn't really, I don't know, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about this. I don't know if we ever really got to the bottom of it, but it tasted so sharp and astringent. I guess Ecstasy of Green is so fruity and kind of grassy and green that I feel like when we moved to In the Loop, it was just sort of like, it felt really bitter. And I don't know, I guess that was more of like an emotional choice than a truly scientific one, but that's how we ended up. I don't know, I'm curious if people would have ordered them differently. I guess it's an art, more of an art than a science probably, but I think Mithril Clouds is like kind of the most hazy, most flavorsome. I think it's also the highest ABV, if I'm not wrong. Not quite, I think, I don't know. So it is not the highest ABV, turns out, but yeah, we just thought that it had the most kind of like aggressive hop flavor of the three, so that's why we put that in. But.
And I have noticed
it feels like the most coating.
Most coating, I think, is a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, where if it kind of coats and then you taste something sort of similar, like for example the fresh hop from Single Hill versus the In the Loop, they're both, you know, they're both gonna be very hoppy, very light, very fruity, but they're also gonna, you know, with the Ecstasy of Green, it's a fresh hop, so you're already gonna pull a little bit of those earthy characteristics, and then the In the Loop is already a pretty earthy blend as it is. So I think you kind of sometimes can it's easy to kind of get blinded by like, oh, these were both earthy, so I'm only going to notice these other things that are different about them, versus like, oh no, they're both earthy, which is the correct thing to say. Of like, you're allowed to say they're both earthy, but it can get tough in terms of if you're tasting two things that are fairly similar to try to like to almost get blinded by one of the flavors after that. And that's part of where the training will come in, and like where knowing that you're not wrong in certain things of just saying like, oh yeah, I think this is earthy, but this is also earthy. That's okay to say.
Well, hey, we got a couple of questions coming in, but we should probably cover the Mithril Clouds first.
Yeah, I did want to talk about that.
Oh, sorry.
So
yeah.
let's go there first, and then we'll be pretty much finished with my screen sharing, and I can pop us back to be big on the screen. So yeah, tropical first here, which I think is probably pretty accurate. I feel like I get, and like I said, I'm not in sales, I'm in sensory, so I can say whatever I want. I don't have to worry about hurting people's feelings. Not that I'm about to say something bad, but papaya, I totally agree with, and papaya is interesting. I love papaya, like as a fruit, love it. But it is kind of like almost a savory fruit, if that makes sense, or it's almost kind of got a sweaty, I know that sounds really bad, but like, and like I said, to be clear, I do really like papaya, but I do get a bit of that kind of tropical fruit that's maybe like slightly overripe, or like a little bit of that kind of sweaty, kind of savory aroma. I don't know if anyone else got that.
I get that a lot with a lot of Mosaic and Galaxy heavy beers, where you feel like you've got a super ripe tropical fruit that's on the verge of turning.
Yeah. Yeah, not quite like rotten fruit. I would not go that far, but kind of, you would want to eat it today if you smelled a fruit that smelled like that.
Exactly. Well, and did the other thing I got the papaya, but the other one I got, I don't know if it's in the results, but I also got blueberry out of it.
See if we got berry coming up. Yeah, we got 6 people said berry and 3 coalesced on blueberry, so that's pretty decent out of 32 people.
Yeah.
For that most specific characteristic, that's a pretty good convergence there. Herbaceous is interesting. Do you guys get any herbaceous? I don't know if I would have noted that, but 9 people is pretty strong.
Yeah, I think I'd look back down at sample oxide, but I kind of look at the green tea answers because I got a little bit of a kind of a green tea type character, which I get a lot with these sort of heavier dry hopped beers.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. Grapefruit rearing its head again. Let's see what the taste said. I hear a dog.
Yes, that's my Hugo. Sorry.
Say hi to Hugo for me.
Hugo's
So a little bit more spread out, which I think is interesting on this one. Kind of like close between low and medium bitterness. Pretty good consensus on the sweetness being low. I don't know, it smells like it should be really sweet. And this is something I tell my panelists to do that is another thing you would never do in public, but you do for sensory, is if you're unsure about the taste, like what's happening on your tongue, you can plug your nose. It can be pretty helpful to kind of blind out the aromas, because if you smell something that smells really tropical and stone fruit, you're going to want to say it's sweet because those things are typically very sweet. But if you plug your nose, then you get kind of a more pure assessment of the taste.
Well, and I think that's also when you're going with a beer that's hazier like this. I mean, I think with that extra body in there, if you're getting a lot of those big fruit tones, I think your brain instantly wants to go sweet. Even if the finish itself isn't actually sweet, it's just the combination of that medium body plus maybe something like oats or whatever else they're using to build it up, and then all of this tropical fruit type stuff is making you think, well, this has got to be fruit salad, so therefore it's sugary.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a pretty strong effect. So, yeah. Okay. So we've talked about Mithril clouds. Let's go back to questions.
Wait, is there any way that we can get a sense of what people's favorite beer was for the day?
There absolutely is. Let's do that now. I was going to save it for the end, but we will see who took the crown.
Boy, it's darn close.
Okay.
Wow.
Look at that.
So
That is
shockingly close.
That's
yeah,
actually
it's
like,
really close.
They're
that's
pretty
actually
much
like
even.
I was gonna say that's statistically close enough that you can't really, in my mind, you couldn't really call a winner out of that.
Yeah, it would be tricky. We have a different number of people who rated each one, which would make the statistics very difficult. But looks like it's interesting because, so Balebreaker wins. They have this really strong column here on 8, but it kind of almost feels like the weight. It looks like some people maybe didn't rate it because it defaults to 5. And so I think that's why we don't get like a bell curve or not like a normal distribution on this, because some people probably forgot to go back and actually rate their favorite. So that's probably skewing things a little bit, but we have to give it to Balebreaker.
That was definitely my favorite.
Well, and I would totally suspect that would be your favorite, since that was the non-haziest of the bunch.
I was going to say, man, you got it exactly. The astringency and the hazy ones just really throws me.
Yeah, and that's fair.
And I will say again, with that single hill, the ecstasy, I was surprised at, like, for a fresh hop beer, how little of that green plant material that it had.
But, there wasn't as much as you often get, but there was enough there to make it not my favorite.
So let's run through. We got like 10 open questions here, so I say we take these in a hurry.
Lightning round.
There you go. Robert says, Robert says, I find a temperature has a huge impact on flavor. Do you recommend tasting through different temperatures?
I would recommend like serving the beer at the kind of recommended temperature, which you can find online, kind of the different categories of beer, what temperatures there are. But as the beer gets warmer, you're going to be able to detect more flavors. As the beer gets colder, it's going to tighten up. You're going to get less out of it. So depending on whether you want to just enjoy the beer in a pleasant way, I would say serve it at the recommended temperature. If you want to do sensory analysis, maybe a little bit warmer than that will help you kind of dig down into the flavors a little bit more.
There you go.
Next question.
I think a big part of that too is if you're doing sensory on beer, you kind of want it, like you said, based on that style of beer how they want it to be served, because if a beer is going to get warm, you're going to get probably more oxidation flavors. You're going to pull a little bit more of a skunky flavor to it, which isn't what the brewer was intending to give off in that beer. So that's why you kind of want to stick to where its desired temperature is. Otherwise, you're giving sensory on a beer where it's not necessarily what that brewer was trying to put out.
Right. Yeah, I always tell people it's like really with any of this stuff, like whether you're doing experiments or sensory, it's less about trying to get a pure answer and as much trying to answer the question of, is this actually a thing I like?
Yes.
Right.
Now, of course, for you guys in sensory, it's going to be a little different. But
there's a comment here that really falls in line with my ratings on these two. Josh Lindsay says, I used herbaceous as dank since they don't add that term on sample ox. And that is exactly the same thing I did when we were going through and rating these right now.
All right, and then speaking of other questions, let's see. Casey Faulkner asks, tasting a QE is easy to practice at home, but lexicon calibration seems almost impossible to work on without a group. Considering social distancing, do you know of any other ways to work on calibration besides sample ox?
I feel like we kind of touched on this with the reference standards. So I think that's a really strong place to start, is to get actual examples of aromas and practice on your own. You actually don't need another person to tell you that cedar oil smells like cedar. You don't need to have consensus with another person for that to represent that aroma in a very valid and strong way for you. So I think just smelling things around your house, like genuinely, like take the spices out of the spice drawer and sniff through them all and then mix them up, close your eyes and see if you can identify them again. Think little things like that is a really good way to kind of hone your palate without using anyone else to help you. Again, like I said, you don't need other people to tell you that cinnamon smells like cinnamon. Like that should be a good representation of that aroma. So just little like smelling everything around your house and being confident that you can detect it in a beer after you've practiced at home, I think is a good way to go.
So, sounds like we need to put together a document to make it easy for everybody. And actually going along with that, there's a question in there from Matthew Salvatore who says, are there any online training programs to help improve sensory / flavor identification in a beer? So
I know like the Cicerone beer server is a place that a lot of people start. So that has a lot of kind of sensory components. You learn about kind of style guidelines and stuff as well, but they have a lot of sensory information there. You can't train sensory without smelling things though. I mean, really, like you can't say in text what tropical fruit smells like. You have to just go buy tropical fruit and do it. Like there's really no way to do it without getting your nose into examples of things. So that's, yeah.
There. All right. And then Jeremy Wickham, one of our listeners on the podcast. Hey, Jeremy. He said, are all your panelists trained in sensory? And do you bring in untrained, in quotes, palates, like an everyday consumer in to participate in the sensory panels?
Yes. So there are different tests that we run when we want to do descriptive analysis, which is basically someone filling out kind of like what you guys just did with sample ox, describing all the aromas. We use trained panelists who we know are validated on all of those aromas. But there are other tests like hedonic testing or like liking, how much do you like this, that people don't need training. That's almost kind of more of a consumer facing test. So it's okay if you're not trained, whether or not you like it is all we care about. It doesn't really matter what your background is. So depending on the test, you kind of break them into two categories. One requires trained panelists, and the other, it's okay to just get any Joe Schmo off the street.
Well, it seems to me that those have two different purposes, right? So it's like
Exactly.
With the trained panelists, you want to be able to say, okay, we're dialing in. This is exactly what we're getting. Bang, 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 bang. And then on the hedonistic side, you're wanting more like, hey, if I give this to my customers, what are they going to enjoy it?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
But you don't want to take a guy whose favorite beer is Coors Light and give him a bottom cutter.
Yeah, that's another, like getting some of that demographic information about what kinds of beer that person normally drinks is helpful. You can exclude people if they dislike it, but they never drink that kind of beer anyway, then that information's not that valuable. So it is good to gather a bit of background information in that context.
I think that's called the untapped phenomenon of one star. I don't like IPAs.
Oh, it's a mess. It's chaos.
Hey, Tessa,
Yeah.
we have a couple questions from the Huva app
Okay,
that we haven't really gone over yet.
sure.
One, do you feel carbonation affects flavor?
Absolutely, yeah. Carbonation has a huge responsibility in bringing the aromas up to your nose. It's what kind of disturbs the beer and stirs it up and agitates the volatile aromatic compounds so that you can smell them. But also, I think it adds a bit of bite. Sometimes people perceive that as like almost bitterness or sharpness, which I think can, really mask flavors if the carbonation's really, really high. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it does. It definitely makes a difference. Like you said, it kind of forces it into your nose a little bit. I know that the English brewers out there will say that carbonation actually like covers up aroma.
It does a bit, I think.
Yeah. But I do think it covers it up a bit, but I do also think it brings another level to it, and that's just kind of the difference between a cask conditioned and a carbonated beers. Neither are really wrong, like whether or not it gives more aroma or whether or not it expresses it. It's just a different style of beer essentially at that point.
And a very good example I have at that point is Duker's IPA over in the UK. I had it both on cask and on draft, and the amount of difference that was displayed was like, on keg, like how we're used to thinking, everything was about that bitterness and the sharper flavors and aromas. And on cask, it actually opened up and it was way more flowery.
Definitely.
All right, well, we have another question. Oh, sorry, go ahead, JT.
Oh, I was just going to kind of agree. Like, I think that is just almost a mouthfeel perception of what, because they're still in there, but I think, carbonation can kind of mask a little bit of that. Not so much in the off flavor side, but yeah, it can kind of take away a little bit of those beta acids in terms of what you're perceiving, because you're going to get more of that sharpness, more of that bitterness, more of that mouthfeel in a carbonation versus in a cask. You'll get a little bit more of those secondary flavors, those retronasal flavors that we were talking about earlier.
Great. Oh, this one question might be directed to you as well. Do cryohops behave on the hot side as consistently as traditional pellets?
As traditional pellets, yes, I think so. So cryo, if anybody's not aware, is the separation of it's the product we release, which is we cryogenically freeze our hot pellets, or not our pellets, but our cones, and then we separate it from the brag fraction. So we're only there with the lupulin pellets, which is what gives off a lot of those really like more of the fruity, really fruity flavors, those bright flavors, versus the bract, which gives off a lot of those beta acids, which is like woody, herbal, things like that. So yes, sorry, I kind of hit a pothole. Can you repeat that question real quick? I was talking myself into a circle.
No worries. Do cryohops behave
Yes.
on the hot side as consistently as regular like T90s?
Yeah, so they do behave, and the joy of the cryohops is with those lupulin is you don't need to use quite as much. You use it more as a 2-to-1 ratio. So if you were to use, say, 2 grams of a T90, use 1 gram of a cryo, because you were getting just that pure lupulin. So on the hot side, I really suggested not so much on the hot side. I would say maybe boil, maybe late boil, because at that point you are just kind of boiling it off, where cryo, you want it to be more of that aromatic side of, that's what we're shooting for. It's just to pull those awesome aromas of a hop. So if you're using it too early in a boil, talking about those survivables that we were talking about earlier, you're going to just be boiling a lot of that off, versus if you use it later, you can kind of hold on to a lot of those aromas that you're hoping for.
I've found that I prefer using cryo in at least the same amount as T90, and sometimes even more. And it's not because they're less effective, it's because they're so good and so clean that the beer can take more, I can dry hop a 6-gallon batch with 3 ounces of cryo which is, at least as much as I'd use in T90, if not more. And I just absolutely love the effect.
Definitely. And I mean, in terms of just a brewing on a production scale, if we want to get into that point.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's different.
Yeah, no, and it's really, really neat in that sense too, because then at that point, when you're starting to think about your usage and things like that, what's nice about cryo too is you get less hop lossage in there. You get less shrub in the bottom of the kettle. It saves a little bit of mess, and then at the same time, it gives you a bigger yield. Which, if we're thinking on a practicality point of, a production brewer, especially on a smaller scale, you think like things like cold storage space is a big thing, or shipping costs, things like that. And that's really where that cryo can kind of come into play. But also, like you said, it just is so clean and just gives you some awesome flavors to it that you're hoping for.
To me, that's one of the advantages of being a home brewer and not a commercial brewer.
Yeah, totally.
We don't have to worry about that stuff.
We have a question that kind of runs alongside that, so we'll see if you answer. If not, we do have a presentation on advanced products and innovation. But from Matthew, we have, what's the difference between terpene extracts and cryo? But to clarify, because he's seen some terpene extracts on the market, and he's just not quite sure what the difference between that is and cryo.
So I can't speak too much to terpene extracts because I don't know a ton of it, but I know that is a big thing in the cryo products that you want to pull from the lupulin. So in terms of one versus the other, I'm not too sure, but I do know that cryo shoots pretty heavily into pulling a lot of those terpenes, and a lot of that is hop dependent, just in terms of what hops give off what oils. But so I'd assume, this is me just kind of, I don't know the actual answer, but I'd assume the extract is more just like a specific, we want these terpenes, we want this, versus cryo, you're still going to get a lot of those cool characteristics from the hop flavor as well of what that hop can give off.
All right, great. So we just have a couple ones, so we'll run through these real quick and then we can end up the session. So from Mike, is there any evidence that some hops will spoil more quickly in sunlight than others? I swear Mosaic turned skunky within moments of walking into a sunny beer garden.
That's interesting. I haven't seen any scientific literature about that, but I have to imagine that that there would be some compelling results if that research was ever conducted. I know Mosaic kind of tends to go. Sometimes it can go a little like onion garlic, which is sort of in that family of flavors. So I could see how that might be exacerbated more quickly by sunlight maybe than for other hop varieties. But I'm not aware of any research. I don't know if anyone else on this call is.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about hop to hop, but I do know that light plays a big difference in the beer itself. I don't know a ton about certain hops, or if some are some more sensitive to the light than others, but I do know that the beer itself is very sensitive to light and will give off a lot of off flavors if it is exposed to light. Like you said, skunkiness to a beer is a big indicator of light exposure. So Mosaic, I think it's just a funky enough hop that, when those off flavors come out, it also kind of accentuates those other flavors that Mosaic will give off, which, can give off a lot of that dank guava flavor to it as well, a lot of berries. So I think it can kind of just bring about that a little more.
Great, thanks. So there's one question here. We may have kind of already gone over it when we were doing the test results. But Francis was just curious if our professional panelists, Jeremy and Tessa, if you're able to post what you guys sensed in the beers, they're interesting to see if they can see the side-by-side results from what you guys did versus what just the general consensus was. And then just kind of the last one is more of it's not a question, it's just they're giving you some props, Tessa and the rest of the group. There was a great session, great information. So kudos to you on that one.
Wow, what a great question. I love questions like that. Is that it? Are we good on questions? I guess for the, I guess we can post that. Full disclosure, I didn't actually fill out a ballot because it would have been a bit too much for me to do all at one time to kind of guide the discussion and actually put my full head and heart into filling out. But I can probably go through and pull out the results that were submitted by the people on this call. I'm actually not sure if this software has that capability, but I will investigate and get back to you, Nicole, so you can get that answer to the...
If we're able to, we'll post it in the session online. No promises, but we will try what we can. Any other parting remarks from anybody before we go through some final...
I just want to thank Drew and Denny for joining us. You guys have been great as always, and we really appreciate your feedback and your perspective. And
thanks
yeah,
for
we really
asking
appreciate
us.
it.
And JT, as soon as we're through all this crap, I want to get up there and brew with you, man.
Yes, please. Anytime. I'd love to have you out.
And I will also say IPA. It's what's for breakfast.
That's right.
Today it is.
Well, cool.
Awesome.
I just want to say to, obviously, Drew, Denny, you guys were awesome. Thank you, Tessa, for putting this on. And just everybody who joined in, thank you for joining. I hope you guys enjoyed the beers we chose for you. Keep drinking. Keep enjoying. Thank you guys for being part of it.
Tessa and JT, we'll be in touch because we'd love to have you on the podcast to continue these conversations further.
Definitely.
Fantastic.
Anytime.
I'd love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So Jeremy, if your brewing career doesn't work out, you can be on a podcast. So thank you all so much for being on this session, for the attendees that have joined on, that ordered some sensory kits. And obviously a huge thank you again to Denny, Drew, JT, and Tessa. It was a great session, lots of great information. This is officially the longest session we've had, so it's amazing when there's so much. No, it's great. We always love when there's great conversation, great questions, and great content. So thank you so much. And then just a reminder to everybody, the session was recorded, so you'll be able to go back and watch it should you want to for more information, as well as all the sessions we've already done. All the ones that I posted in the chat throughout the sessions are all up on virtualharvest.com. The Fresh Hop one, and a tour of our Aroma Dome and so on. And then if you do have any questions, follow-up questions, or those that are watching this recording, please email brewschool@yakimachief.com and we can get your questions answered, as well as if you have any specific brewing questions. We do have a group of in-house experts that can help answer your questions as far as that goes. But otherwise, thank you all so much for joining us and for participating and drinking beer at 10 a.m., 11 a.m. in the morning. But otherwise, everyone have a great rest of your day or evening or wherever you're tuning in. So thank you so much, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Don't forget, it's 5 o'clock in London.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Bye, all.